Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to another episode of the happenings of the Roanoke Valley Chess Club. And this is a game that I played last year, 2019, in May at Roanoke's Festival in the Park, which is kind of the big get together recruiting drive to try and get new members into the club. And it's held typically at Elmwood Park in Roanoke. Unfortunately, because of situation going on, it's not going to happen this year, which is a little bit disappointing. They may hold it later if they get things opened up at some point, but it's typically the Memorial Day thing. So yeah. Anyway, this was played between myself and one of the club champions from the 60's, who occasionally shows up to the club or to the festival in the park to play a game or two. And I had the white pieces, he had the black. May call this from passing the torch or whatever, because I did tie for the club championship in 2018 with a score of 4 of 5. And it was. But tie breaks recognize somebody else as the champion, so Anyway, so I played e4, c5, and we get into a Scheveningen. And if you are from Holland, I apologize for butchering the name of a Dutch town. And nowadays, it's considered a little bit more accurate that if you're going to play a Scheveningen, you should be playing a6 and then e6. But for the reason that essentially because it delays g4 one move. But I do that on purpose because I like to get all of my pawns rolling, not just the g pawn. Because if my opponent manages to kick the knight on d4, I like to put it behind the pawns rather than in front of the f4 pawn. Rather than in front of a pawn on f2. I want to have my pawns advanced. Bishop e7. Okay, now I play g4. And I played similar positions to this. Maybe not this exact position. Flip a6 and bishop e7. So basically put this pawn on a6 and this bishop on f8. And I've had this position at least 50 times. So, yeah. Castles, I kick the knight, and I develop. E5, I think this was just tempo wasting, and it allows me to place my knight on an excellent square where it's really hard to get it away from your king. And, of course, it doesn't do anything to help your bishop on e7, your bishop on c8. Your knight on c6, your rook on a8, And I wanted to put in a slightly more accurate line for black, and this is kind of what I came up with, rather than what happened in the game. And I would still much rather have white here than black, but I would say that black is doing better than he did in game. Instead, what happened after knight f5 was my opponent played b6, and that doesn't really address the needs of the position. Sure, maybe it's trying to get some development and go after that e4 pawn, but it's kind of locked in. So I just play knight d5, and, well, that puts the kibosh on black's development, because now he has to defend that bishop on e7. I thought knight c6 was better. But then you have this removing the guard theme, and I still get my attack. And actually, this winds up being pretty devastating. And I actually wind up with an extra rook at the end of the day. Yeah, so not good for black. Okay, so we can go back a few moves and look at what actually happened in the game. My opponent played rook e8 to defend the bishop. And, well, I jump in with the queen. I'm going to play either g6 or knight a6 or knight g7, one of the knights to f6, and I'm going to run my opponent off the board. And my opponent decided to help me with this move, g6. And it's hard to suggest a different move. Because everything is weak and everything is being attacked and everything is horrible. Maybe pawn takes f4, but even then, I don't see how that's helping his position. Knight f8 maybe. It's really hard to suggest a move. g6 got played, then knight to h6 check, and I just drop my queen back a square. Knight c5, trying to get at either the bishop or the pawn, and maybe even develop your own bishop. But I bring in another piece into the attack, and yeah, I'm looking to push f5. I'm looking to take on e5. I'm looking at maybe sacking on f7 to get at the king. So the position for black is already busted, and I thought this was slightly more accurate, knight d3, than what my opponent did. And I would say in this position, white is the one having all the fun. So going back to what happened, my opponent took this pawn, and I played rook here because black can't take the pawn on g5. And f7 is extremely weak. I thought maybe bishop e6 or rook f8 to try and hold on. But then knight f6, and it's getting really difficult to do anything with the black pieces, because the king position is just bound up, and yeah, you're getting checkmated. Unfortunately, my opponent decided to take this pawn and fail to that checkmate, or fail to that simple tactic, and I'm checkmating here in very short order. It's really difficult to suggest anything for black, because my next move, if he does, my next move is takes the queen, and if the queen moves away from the guard of f6, I play bishop f6, which is mate. And you can't play either knight to d7 because I take the queen. And he can't move the king. And he can't move the rook. And actually, if you play rook here, for example, I play here, the only legal move is takes, and then I play here, and that is checkmate. So that's just one example of how it can go wrong. And if you go here, well, simply I take, and my next move, because I like art and being artistic and all that, I'm playing queen f6. So let's say he doesn't take that and tries instead to find another way to defend f6 or trade something off. I don't know. Let's play that here. Here. I'll play here, takes, and that is checkmate, because the king can't move and he can't block, and yeah. So that's just, some of the checkmating ideas that I have in this position. So, yeah, that was the game, and my opponent resigned here, and we talked a little bit, and while this definitely wound up being somewhat having the flair and style of a Keres attack, technically it's a slightly different variation, but it has the same fire that a Keres attack has. Normally the Keres attack is just an immediate 6g4, and believe the theory is an h4, bishop e7. You can't play there. I would play. I would honestly play f4. And I've had very similar positions to this as well. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye bye.